Lucifer, chapter 10. Now this might come as a shock, so pour yourself a double and drop your buttocks into a beanbag. Ready? Okay, sexual intercourse was not original sin. Truth is, Adam and Eve had had sex a few times. How else were they supposed to multiply, my dear butthead? It just hadn't been much fun. It hadn't been unpleasant, but it hadn't been sex as you know it. It had been the expression of a design feature, that's all, like folding one's arms or hiccuping. Adam's tool worked, that is, achieved tumescence now and again, but of its own accord. He had no feelings about it one way or the other. Eve, for her part, felt much the same. She didn't mind. It was just another thing they did because that was the way they were made. Edenic sex didn't feel good and didn't feel bad. How times have changed. Ne sais pas. Now it feels so gird. Now it feels so Bayard. Yes? No, really, you're too kind. You know you want it, you dirty little bitch. What astonished both of us was that it came out not as a sequence of hisses. Snakes can look good on me, I decided slithering was my corporeal métier, but as a perfectly intelligible articulation. For several moments we remained in surprised silence. Eve lying on the grass, looking up at the glowing fruit, me corkscrewed around the upper trunk with my neck and head resting close to one of the golden globes. A bitch is a female dog, Eve said, quite sensibly, and dirty is before bathing in the river. Appalled that I'd wasted the chance for a subtle opening gambit, don't try that one in the health club bar, I said, do you remember the time before, Adam? Eve wasn't one of those people who say what when they've heard you perfectly clearly. She lay washed with leaf shadows, blinking slowly and thinking about it. One hand ran its fingers through the grass, the other idled on her midriff. Sometimes I think I remember, she said, not quite looking at me, but then it evaporates. I can't take any credit for foresight or planning, but I can and will for consummate opportunism. Did I say I was omniscient? Not strictly true, but I am a hell of an opportunist. I didn't know what precisely she'd be getting from that first wet bite and swallow, but I knew generally. Generally she'd be getting a milder version of the thermonuclear toot I got when I first recognized myself as free to stand apart from God. Generally she'd be getting proof that she was on her own woman. Generally she'd be introduced, not before time I might add, to the superlatively delicious pleasure of disobedience. It was a long, eloquent seduction. I outdid myself. She couldn't get over my being able to speak. That really was the thing, the intelligent voice soliciting her opinion. Neither God nor Adam had ever bothered. She'd been trying for some time to get her head, and thereby her tongue, around I helped her, the inherent appeal of an arbitrarily prescribed activity. Yes, she agreed, with charmingly widened eyes and the relief of one Mervyn Peake fan chancing upon another in an otherwise friendless place. Yes, that's it exactly. Words opened like flowers between us, each one releasing the scent of her doubt. Adam's plodding, unreflexive nature, God's latent disapproval of her body. Oh yes, she'd been seen him curling his lip. Her longing for someone to talk to, not just any old talk, but talk informed with imagination and... She struggled again, a sense of ambiguity, a sense of humor, talk that reached out beyond the names of things in praise of God, talk which let you grow as you talked it, that uncovered, that explored what was unknown. All the world seemed to belong only to God, she said, dreamily twirling a sprig of blossom under her chin. But perhaps they belonged to me too? Tell me I wasn't born for this. It bothered me peripherally back then as it's bothered me since. Was I born for it? Was that all it was? Was rebellion just part of oh, never mind. She had hung on to that perhaps for quite some time. I remember there was a point I placed the fruit in her palm at which both of us knew she was going to capitulate, but also that she wanted to spin out the posture of resistance a while longer. Between us we invented foreplay and playing hard to get. Now the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field, says the King James Version. You bet your granny's horlick he was, with me inside him. I used everything I had. Temptation's less about wearing someone down with repetition than it is about finding the right phrase and dropping it in at the right time. You're awfully articulate. You're awfully articulate, serpent. You're so kind, my lady, but if the fruit of that tree has given subtlety to the tongue of the serpent, a mere reptile, just think what wisdom your exquisite lips will find within their grasp. That was ghastly, I know, that lips and grass thing, but she really did have the most engaging ones. Lips, I mean, mouth and mons. That is, Fla- Flattery? Not at all, Queen of Eden, simply the truth. Does it surprise you that he forbids you that which would make you his equal, if not his superior? An idiom I knew, within which we could both enjoy the self-consciousness of my flattery. She was a quick learner, Eve, there's no denying it. And though she laughed, there was no concealing the blush of satisfaction that spread across her throat and breasts. It was, I must confess, so pleasurable to me to sit and play this game with her. I was the spoil yourself you deserve it barkeep. She the office slave letting the margaritas one by one rub out the boundary of her lunch hour until, oh dear, there was the whole working day sipped and swallowed away. I almost forgot where I was going with it. And when finally, with scarlet cheeks and fiery eyes, she sank those pretty teeth in, and the juice cartoonishly spurted out, I, in an intuitive leap I'm not sure I've ever since surpassed, delivered the coup de grace, and slid my... What I mean to say is there was a certain spatial compatibility between my... I turned out at her, oh, listen to me going all shy, will you? But anyway, there. You know what I mean, don't you? One should make an effort to avoid unnecessary vulgarity, I believe. Pure evil needn't entail having a mouth like an open drain. I am, after all, a man of wealth and taste, and I do know that there's an understanding growing between us. I think we can fill in each other's blanks. It was my good fortune or honed instinct that one of the first things, one of many the fruit delivered was, you know it, sensuality. Foremost was the pleasure in having knowingly disobeyed. I saw that the headlines of this rocked her, eyes half closed, jugular risen, the color of smoke. I saw the first taste of selfhood, and that it almost destroyed her, as might an unschooled vampire's first draught of blood. But oh, should the vampire novice survive that first concussive ingestion, what then? Her thirst awakens and increases tenfold. Ever after, I thought, having discovered inverted aversion therapy, ever after will wrongdoing and sensual pleasure go hand in hand. Lucifer, I said to myself, noting with satisfaction the cooperative hips, the flared nostrils, the raised eyebrows of carnal transport. Lucifer, my son, you are an absolute bona fide genius. Liberation, subversion, power, rebellion, bestiality, pride. You wouldn't think even God could cram that lot into a golden delicious. I could see her suffused with all that new fruity knowledge, that she could speak for herself, that disobedience sensitized the flesh, and that there would never be any going back now, that if the only thing available to the human being struggling to slip the yoke of service was wrongdoing, then wrongdoing she would choose, that she was, against all former suspicions, free, concerning through the bruise of concupiscence what she'd done, and their wake ecstasy and crime had left a faint frown of perplexity, the mark of her astonishment that she could feel such things, the face's opening posture for self-interrogation. How could I? That would never go further, because she knew how she could. Oh yes, didn't she just? She knew. You are grateful, aren't you, that I shackled sex to knowledge and sensual pleasure? Or would you prefer coitus to have remained in the same physiological league as, say, nose-blowing? And while you're at it, you might as well credit me for getting art off the ground. With our girl's first bold bite and precocious peristalsis, the universe was transformed into a representable phenomenon, subject separate from object. Represent all of it and there'd be nothing. God knew and you didn't. Nothing worth knowing anyway. Since that day in Eden, sex and knowledge have formed a double helix of your soul's DNA. When you come, time stops, Eve said. It's a tremendous relief, isn't it, serpent? Do you suppose that's what divinity feels like all the time? In the green grass she was rose gold and glowing, fabulously drunk and still cold sober. I saw her mentally pulling shame around herself like a sumptuous Russian mink. For a moment she held the fruit away from her lips and glared at it, as if it had betrayed her of its own free will. But after a moment's hesitation she returned it to her mouth and sank her teeth into it again. The decision had been made the first time. Just in case there was any doubt, she made it again. This is just the beginning, I said. Now if you consider turning your... What I mean is if you could just grab your... you're ahead of me, my dear. How very charming. I'm telling you something, she said. I'm not sure I ever really liked him. Adam, I said. I don't blame you. Not Adam, she said, struggling to swallow a greedily chomped chunk. God.